Excellency Mr. Mohamed Lulishki, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center for the New South. Mr. Abdelhak Ghouli, Deputy Director at the Directorate of Strategy, Statistics and Planning of the Moroccan Ministry of National Education, Preschool and Sports. Mr. Mohamed Maqtit, Head of the Studies and Planning Division at the Moroccan Ministry of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development. Dr. Christine Pfeiffer, Head of the Futures Literacy and Foresight Program at the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Ms. Rania Mashlab, Head of Delegation at the International Committee of the Red Cross. And Ms. Laura Palatini, Chief of Mission at the International Organization for Migration. A pre-recorded video of Ms. Sarah Parker, Acting Team Leader of the Research and Innovation Unit in the International Organization for Standardization, will be screened during this panel. Mr. Lulishki, the floor is yours.
But not too much to fall asleep, because we have a very exciting session. Before beginning to moderate this session, let me begin by saying something that really I have at heart. لا يمكن لأي منا.
Nobody amongst us can talk about oversight and futurism without bringing to mind a man who was a pioneer in defining the necessity of working on oversight. Or the man is the late Mehdi al-Manjra, who was a philosopher and a writer and a lecturer, and he was also the director of the cabinet of the UNESCO general director. This man was always pondering a question: where are we heading? He published many books. First one, for an appropriate use of oversight studies. When it was published and distributed, this book was exhausted, sold out on the first day. Mr. Manjra was elected in 1981 as a president of the International Union for Oversight Studies. He was president of the International Association of Oversight Studies from 77 to 81. And I haven't found anyone better. I haven't found anything better than giving us a synopsis of his ideas as an introduction of this round table. And I'm quoting: this is not myself talking. You all know that's what I talked to you about before, as the future is your present today. This is not a question of a prophecy, but a setting up of the tools that we need to be able to master the present. And this doesn't require a very extraordinary skills. All we need to see the features of the future is just a set of skills and knowledge that all of which would form a parallel to the problems we face. If we don't do this, the future will be among the various alternatives that interact and would lead us to the most probable future. You don't need any heavy conceptual means or systems to be able to see where things are heading. This is the science of future. the futurism or oversight. It was never a system of forecasting, but it's a management of the probabilities and possibilities so that it could be exploited in a better way. And I come to the last sentence in which we see a lot of genius. Probably I forgot to mention to you the importance of preserving the simplicity of your dreams and the vitality of your imagination as you go into the adventure of looking into the future. That is, unquote, and the end of a quotation that I have always wanted to start with as an honor to this man who was among the first people who drew our attention to the importance of the future or looking into the future. This afternoon session, which I'm honored to run, will be made up of many presenters, experts, men and women. And I'm very happy that there is equity and equality between men and women for the interests of women. They will try to look into the future or oversee the future or from different positions concerning diverse challenges in link, most particularly in link with immigration, education, sustainable developments, and energy transitions, or the world of invention, research, and human science. So, first, I would start with Mrs. Laura Platini, who is Chief of Mission at the International Organization for Migration. The floor is yours, ma'am. Thank you. And you know that we'll try to keep to the time slot of 10 minutes, if possible, please. Thank you. Good morning, inshallah. We respect the time slot.
Thank you very much. I would like to start with a few words of thanking the organizers, ISESCO for the invitation, the Policy Center for the New South, the Prince Mohammed bin Fahd University, the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University for hosting us, the dear co-panelists, and you participants. In the previous panel this morning, we heard a lot the words risks, fragilities, complexities when talking regarding the future. Well, yes. Well, migration is a complex phenomenon. Is a complex phenomenon now, it has always been and will always be. And nowadays, it is the focus of significant political and media attention, and too often is frequently misunderstood and misinterpreted. States have consistently identified availability of timely, accessible, reliable, disaggregated, and comparable data as being key for effective migration management and good migration governance. The need for such data is reflected in the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, also known as GCM, which calls for collection and utilization of, and here I quote, accurate and disaggregated data as a basis for evidence-based policy in its very first objective. Reliable data represent the foundation for a strategic foresight exercise. And foresight is key for government and development actors to be better prepared for changes in human mobility. Times of crisis bring an acute awareness of essential need for reliable data. Oh, sorry, I mismanaged. Yeah. I was talking about the awareness that we realize we have for the need of reliable data, while starkly revealing gaps and deficiencies in existing data systems. It's in time of crisis that we realize that we don't have reliable data. It is necessary to capitalize on this awareness, build on experiences, and leverage new technology to strengthen the evidence base that policymakers, practitioners, and the public need to understand and navigate the complex and fast-changing environment. In other words, there is need for anticipatory action to mitigate humanitarian actions. Data represent the lifeblood of decision-making, enabling coordinating action among actors at the national, regional, and global levels, particularly when such actions flows out of commitments such as the 2030 Agenda or the GCM that I already mentioned. Data are also essential prerequisites to enable stakeholders to identify patterns and trends in migration, to map common lines of action, and to track progress towards agreed goals and targets. In line with the above, I would like to add that within the United Nations, the Secretary General called for increased foresight in the UN's policy and programming in the report Our Common Agenda, and to prepare for the UN Summit of the Future scheduled for September 2024. In 2022, IOM called for an institution-wide position on foresight, scenario building, and early warning, contributing to the organization's common approach to horizon scanning and forward-looking analysis of data and trends to define future implications for migration and mobility, and to support migration policy and programming. Allow me now to present our ongoing work and thinking process in the field of foresight. There is no universally preferable approach in foresight of human mobility. No one method is intrinsically superior or better to all other methods. Instead, choosing the right approach clearly depends on the context, the geography, the needs, the population profile, the time horizons, etc. When deciding on a predictive system or project, it is imperative that we consider the end users, which are, in our case, the migrants themselves, but also governments, most of them being also IOM member states, and our own programming. In addition, the method should include not only quantitative data, but the opinion of experts in the relevant region that will contribute to a richer qualitative dimension. While forecast and foresight on migration within and to certain regions are plethora, studies on intra-regional and inter-regional migration in many regions generally are fewer in number. The limited availability of large and interoperable data sets can explain only in part this situation. However, we also think that the field of foresight studies is very politically charged and too often offers quite a negative narrative on migration, focusing, as you know very well, on patterns, irregular flows, etc. On the need for better intra-regional migration analysis, I would like to applaud the support provided by the government of Morocco for the establishment of the African Union Observatory on Migration here in Rabat. And I will recall that the majority to explore human mobility foresight. And this with the largest primary data collection portfolio and expertise in various sectors across the humanitarian, development, and peace-building nexus. Thematic and data expertise can hence be utilized for foresight to improve preparedness and the creation of comprehensive development programs that will, in the longer term, reduce the need for emergency life-saving assistance as the costliest modality of assistance, while supporting governments in finding sustainable solutions and uptake on the opportunities created by human mobility. Working towards this goal, IOM is working on key forecast and foresight programming ranging from short-term early warning type of work to reviewing medium-term drivers or predicting the impact of long-term megatrends. IOM provides different toolkits to guide practitioners working on forward-looking migration. Yes. And here is a concrete example. Last April, IOM published a handbook for practitioners called Harnessing Data for Innovation for Migration Policy. This handbook provides first-hand insights into why and how non-traditional data sources can contribute to better understanding migration-related phenomena. The handbook aims to bridge the practical and technical aspects of using data innovation in migration statistics to demonstrate the added value of using new data sources and innovative methodologies to analyze key migration topics that might be hard to fully grasp using traditional data sources, and to identify good practices in addressing issues of data access and collaboration with multiple stakeholders, ethical standards, and security and data protection issues. It includes various methods and data for predicting migration flows, how quantitative and qualitative approaches can be used, and agreements that public organizations should have with the stakeholders to implement only predictions that would not harm migrants. This handbook, a work of IOM and the Big Data for Migration, features institutions like the University of Southampton, University of Utrecht, University of Pisa, Qatar Computing Research Institute, and many other partners. It also highlights the contributions of data holders such as Telefonica and Facebook, now Meta, as well public sectors entities like the government of Indonesia, United States Census Bureau, UNHCR, UN Global Pulse, etc. Another concrete example is on movement prediction. I'm good. Almost close. Almost. I'll go very quickly. Sorry. In more country operations, IOM is working on displacement. On displacement projections related to different events resulting with mobility and displacement, like natural disasters. Last year in Somalia, our displacement estimates resulted in being very close to the actual displacement that occurred. And this enabled us to a better understanding and preparation, and therefore response. Two important considerations. From an ethical point of view, I would like to remind everybody that forecasts regarding migration partners have the potential to be targeting vulnerable individuals, for example, due to border closures or the automated generation of contingency plans. Consequently, it is crucial for international organizations to ensure that predictions about population movements do not adversely impact migrants' access to territory or more broadly to their protection. Moreover, the data used for such prediction must be meticulously managed and curated. Partnerships are very important. We heard that already this morning, so I will not repeat. IOM is looking actively in establishing more and more partnerships, and I hope that among you sitting here today, there will be someone interested in partnering with IOM to improve foresight on migration. Well, the very last thought is that foresight should not be considered only as a technical tool that must stay among technicians. It should be thought and developed as a tool meant to be used for preparedness and response. It should be used to accompany better program and policy. Therefore, a whole of society approach is what is needed, meaning that we need to include not only scientists and data technicians, but also all end users. I will stop here, otherwise I'll thank you very much for your attention, and if you want to contact us, you will find at the end, if you manage to see it, to contact in IOM to continue.
Okay, I'm the first one to recognize that when you have a passion for a topic, you cannot limit yourself to 10 minutes.
Migration
but I would only say that because of the pressure of time, I will invite all of the rest of my colleagues without being any detrimental to any of you, if you can confine to 10 minutes. If you have some details, I think we can leave them to the questions and answer later on. Okay. So please, now the floor is Raniaz Mashlab. She is the head of delegation of ICRC, and she is coming for a long trip, coming from Tunisia. Just in case.
Thank you very much. I don't think I need both. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for this opportunity. I work for the International Committee of the Red Cross, who is the oldest organization, humanitarian organization ever established. We celebrate our 160th anniversary next year. It is very difficult for me to talk about Foresight as a firefighter, because in ICRC we are mainly working on emergency. We are an international humanitarian organization, independent and neutral, that works in conflict and other situations of violence. So our mandate is mainly linked to how can we turn the fire off. I was converted to Foresight by two people. One of them is sitting here in the room, and the other one was mentioned. So Dr. Mehdi al-Manjra and Dr. Qais Hamami, who are here, and I thank them for this discovery. And through that, our organization also started thinking about Foresight, and now we have a special envoy on Foresight and diplomacy within the ICRC, and we are trying to work slowly but surely on prevention, because for us it's not only about forecast, it's about preventing. And I think the first act in terms of foresight that was taken by our founding father, which is Henri Dunant, a Swiss businessman, a failure as a businessman, is codifying the Geneva Conventions. So putting the the law of armed conflict into the Geneva Conventions. Of course, he didn't invent that. It was in all traditions, it's in Islam, it's in Christianity, but what he did is took it out of the realm of spirituality, and make it a universally accepted code that is, of course, signed and ratified by all countries present in the room with the two additional protocols. So what I will walk you through now is a new project that the ICRC is working on. Please bear with me, because I'm not an expert. I'm a practitioner. I'm a firefighter. So I will try as much as possible to walk you through these 5 pages, and I hope that we will have later on some questions. I think there is a presentation that how do I do this? Yeah, voila. Future of literacy. Okay, that's yours. It's not my fault, and thank God I'm not the envoy for diplomacy. I'm not the good voila. Okay. No? Yes? So what? No? No? Launched in December 2020. The initiative fosters the sharing of expertise of Switzerland's 2 federal institutes of technology to the benefit of the humanitarian action. In a competitive process, the ICRC personnel propose a humanitarian challenge that might have a technical solution, and a research proposal is developed with each teams from EPFL and from the Institute in Zurich, and then is submitted as a candidate for funding. Scientific committees from both universities reviews and rate the proposals for their academic credentials and innovative contributions to scientific knowledge. and ICRC personnel review them and rate them according to their importance to the ICRC, the feasibility of the research methodology proposed from ICRC's perspective, and the potential for implementation of the results. The duration of the project must not exceed 2 years. The challenge discussed here to uncover patterns of violence by armed forces and armed groups over time stems directly from a recommendation of the ICRC's 2018's Roots of Restraints in War study. The study suggests that the ICRC ought to expand its monitoring of behavior by armed forces and groups beyond IHL violations, but also to instances of restraint. Identifying genuine restraint can help the ICRC explore who or what might have influenced that restraint, provides an indication of the level of control commanders have over their soldiers or fighters, and permits the ICRC to interrogate its potential role in influencing that restraint through its confidential bilateral dialogue with representatives of armed groups and armed forces. Restraint, however, is counterfactual, and as such is difficult to identify. One way of doing so is to track the patterns of violence to factors and identify the peaks and troughs in the pattern, and then interrogate the possible factors behind the surge and the drop in violence. The drop in violence might not constitute genuine restraint. It might be mechanical, for instance, the start of a rainy season. But it is only by seeing the change and asking the question that we can start to understand factors that might have influenced this behavior, including the ICRC's own action. How was the challenge approached? Due to the confidential nature of the ICRC's own data on the behavior of armed groups and armed forces, we decided to use the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data, ACLED. The data set for this project, because it is an open source, widely used, and has broad coverage of political violence protests around the world. In the ACLED database, each event is entered with a short description of what happened, is classified according to its type of event, and includes details such as the number of fatalities and who was involved. Since ACLED event type classification are not based on categories matching the rules of international law, voila, now I can see the presentation, thank you very much. The rule of international law or international human rights law, the first task at hand was to devise an automated method to reclassify the data in accordance with these legal frameworks. The second task was to dig more deeply into the details of the events, because the ACLED dataset associates only one event to each data entry, regardless of how many distinct episodes of violence the event had. So, for instance, an attack on a village that had 4 people killed, 20 houses burned, and 20 people kidnapped, for ACLED, it was only one event, and we had to reclassify it according to the different types of attack, abduction, property destruction, and killing are equally relevant. This provides the data set with a finer granularity. The data then can be used and be visualized on a chart, plotted against time to show changes in the intensity and the type of violence. Event coding, such as the one performed by ACLED, is done by humans and is resource intensive. Given the volume of data to be parsed for reclassification, the process needed to be automated. So the scientist team used a novel approach called prompt entailment. If you want more information about that, I can send you the link to the science publication. In addition to reclassifying event types, we wanted to identify who perpetrated the violent act, who was the target, and whether we could distinguish between civilians and military casualties. For this part of the algorithm, extractive questions answering, named entity recognition, and binary classification techniques were used. The algorithm was then tested using ACLED data on Colombia, Ethiopia, and Ukraine, representing several thousands of events. The result led to the development of a proof of concept. So we went into the practice part that takes a code book as an input through which domain expert can specify the type of events they are looking to reclassify. This code book is then used with two standard source or open sources, natural language processing models, and the algorithm outputs of a reclassified data set that also contains additional information on who was involved in the event. This approach offers greater flexibility to current methods since event types can be added or codified and modified and requires limited training data, which means a lower cost to changing the model. The code can be easily adapted to additional language, so it can be used in Arabic, in English, in French, or in Spanish. An extra benefit to this approach is that any performance gained on the pre-trained open source models used will be improved and will improve the classification of the process without extra workload. I'm finishing. In a nutshell, this rich collaboration between political and computer scientists from the ICRC, EPFL, and ETHZ produced the model that uses artificial intelligence to give us a clearer and faster picture of the evolutions in the use and type of violence by armed forces and armed groups. It will improve accuracy in the classification of events using categories more closely related to the ICRC's mandate and enrich the data with more granularity. Thank you very much.
If I can take out the 2 minutes for the audio adjustment, I can say that you reasonably respected the
I'm almost
timeline.
Swiss.
Thank
so
you.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, now it's, since you talk about Switzerland, so we can, I'm going to give the floor now to Christine. She will be speaking on behalf of UNESCO. Miss Christine Pfeiffer.
Yes.
And she is speaking on behalf of UNESCO.
Exactly.
Please go ahead. You have exactly the same flexible 10 minutes.
Wonderful. That's great. First of all, thank you for the nice introduction, and thanks to the organizers, ICISCO. It's a pleasure to be here. We feel we are sister organizations, so that is great. I also feel very comfortable here because we have a long-standing relationship with both Prince Mohammed bin Fahd University and UM6P. So it's great to be in this setup and to have your attention. You can see already my first slide. I wanted to, let's say, start with something else. I wanted to ask you what is the biggest resource that humankind has today. It's neither gold, most probably not even data. The colleague had to leave. What is it? An educated brain. We can brainstorm longer. What we say at UNESCO, and especially at the social and human science sector that I represent here today, we would say it is meaning. It's really meaning. And how do you make sense of that meaning? This is something that we try to work a little bit in our umbrella program, which is called MOST, Management of Social Transformation. Many things to say on social transformations, especially in this period. How to face inequalities, how to face the big lack of trust, how to face future anxiety, as we would somehow call it, because, as you might have heard, there are alarming numbers of young people who don't feel happy about the future, who don't feel hopeful. So this is something that will come back to us even a bit later. So I just wanted to invite you to have a little look on what we do at UNESCO. With our 193 member states, we ask why futures literacy and foresight. It is since more than a decade that UNESCO is working on that topic regularly. What do you associate with futures? And if you ask that to the member states, it's very interesting because you get a variety of answers from many different points of view, especially in times of disruption, especially in time of rapid technological development, which has changed somehow our social interaction as well. So very often we receive this answer. We look for predictions. We don't want another COVID to happen. We want data, how risk reluctancy, what can we do? Actually, there is no data from the future. This is something that we have heard already today. What we can do, yes, is forecasting, but we know it might not be enough. So what can we really do from UNESCO? And we champion a capability-based approach here. Why? Because we have the feeling that if you have a competence, then you would engage in making sure you think longer term, making sure you use the future, disseminate something that is helpful and can be taken forward. So how do we do that? We start by revealing what we think is the probable future. Then we engage in a reframe analysis or a reframe exercise where you would see different ways of looking at a phenomenon. You can also say it's an abstract scenario. That's fine. Bring it back to 2023 and elaborate with all the tools we have at our disposal on Foresight the next steps. And somehow they should lead to an action plan, which is not the easiest. We do that not alone. We do it with our member states and with our academic backbone, which are our UNESCO chairs. They are listed here. It's a growing group. You can see what variety of topics our chairs cover, from which angles they look at what we do. And it's a real pleasure to see how this research field, this discipline, this transdisciplinarity can further develop. And in that aim, we have launched recently a call for papers, or a call for abstracts, and we are going to host a symposium to start talking about evaluation. This is the next step we see. We see it's difficult to really define what is included, what is foresight, what is forecasting, what is futures literacy. Okay, if that's difficult because it's a very heterogeneous field, let's think about how to kind of measure impact. We measure what we treasure what we measure. So we need to start to think about that. And we received an overwhelming number of papers addressing these questions that you can see here. No need to read them all now. I will leave them at your disposal. But it's very interesting to bring together this broad community, and it is including the practitioners, because you are, as you said, you are firefighters, and you have all the concrete, let's say, experience, what works, what is difficult, how much resources you have to, what is the time frame, what is reasonable. No? So this is something I'm really looking forward to. In general, very briefly, UNESCO has a role in the UN. We have been acknowledged recently to really guide the HLCP Foresight Network. HLCP stands for the coordination mechanism of all UN organizations. There are many, as you can see here. Many of them start to do foresight. What we have seen is that what was most needed was capacity building. And so we organized a series of masterclasses to present the tools, the most common tools, to bring together leaders, thinkers, to make speculative design. This brought us quite far. It was not just a nice experience. These things are all available if you're interested, and you can have a look, only the theory part, the interactive part, no. And that was successful enough, and our colleague mentioned before our common agenda, to transfer this network into a UN Foresight community of practice, which is part of the executive office of the Secretary General, who wants to, as you have heard, establish strategic foresight more and more. And so UNESCO is going to continue our job there, which is very, very important in our view to make sure we bring it to the next step. We skill up, we upskill the UN employees. Another nice quote that I would like to leave to you now is, as for the future, your task is not to foresee it, but to enable it. This is something that is very important for me in my role as representing an international organization and going to different groups, be it communities, be it universities, be it member states, to create this nurturing environment where it is about enabling. And one concrete example is intergenerational equity. I guess this is something that is dear to all our hearts. UNESCO was a pioneer in that as well. In 1997, there has been a declaration on the responsibilities of the present generation towards future generations. And there are 12 articles who specify how current generations should have an eye on what we leave, what our legacy is. But this was not enough anymore, and we moved forward. We created as an objective the idea to mainstream futures on intergenerational equity, to really put that into something concrete for our user community. And we created a set of tools for intergenerational equity, which you can download. It's all available. There is an inception report that explains the theory, but much more important, there are 8 tools on your disposal which can help you to look at what futures can do. One example is, I don't know if you have ever tried that, if you look at 100 years ago, people were thinking about how would school look like in 100 years from now, and you see it's all boys. So sometimes we are wrong, no? when we anticipate and we look into that. And these tools, what do these tools do? They stimulate specific capabilities. Again, we are back to the capabilities. You see them here. We identified 7 focal areas that we think are needed if you speak about intergenerational equity. And what do the tools do? They nurture these focal areas. Not more, not less. That means if people want to be involved here, they can download it. There is a whole feedback line that is connected to that. And it helps. We have seen that, and colleagues before lunch have mentioned the new agenda for peace. These things help to prevent conflicts, to create a nurturing and participatory environment for young leaders. And we hope maybe it is useful also for this community to see. Why a capability-based approach? I cannot do better than quoting Peter Drucker, who says, "Culture is strategy at breakfast." We believe that futures, be it foresight, be it futures literacy, cannot be brought top-down to somebody. It has to be a personal capability. It has to be something you are interested in, you want to see. We mentioned Sant'Agostino this morning, and I really believe that too. Sometimes you have to go on a big mountain, on the Mont Ventoux, no? And you look inside yourself, even if you look very far. And this can be done through these tools, we believe. There is this suggestion of new tools, not because we believe we are perfect, not at all, but to reach out to a broader community, to all of you with all your specific backgrounds, be it from education, be it from policy making, to support us and to suggest more possible things. In conclusion, I leave you with this picture, which I think speaks especially for an international organization. Do we want to look for equality or equity? This is really sometimes the question that we face also in this current geopolitical moment, which is not easy, and for the single stakeholders we serve, and where we believe, fundamentally, if you all look on the right side, from my right side, world would be better. And with this, I thank you very much, and I'm available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you.
How did I do on time?
Well, I will not disclose, but you were very close anyway. Let me react to your last slide. I think you can try to achieve an equitable equality.
Now I'm very happy to present to you Mr. Mohammed Maktid, who is Head of Studies and Planning Division at the Ministry of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development. Floor is yours, sir. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to give this presentation of what we are doing to talk about the perspectives and foresights and to work on certain constraints that are linked to our socio-economic situation. There will be a small introduction. I'm going to examine the constraints, the tendencies about this climate change theme and water resources, and I'm going to examine the action plans that have been operationalized in order to face such constraints. What is the oversight or foresight, and to what use is it? This morning, all speakers have reminded us about the foresight. Foresight is a look at the future to shed light on the present. There exists a complementarity today between the foresight and strategic thinking and planning. What are the steps of this ideal schemata? First, we need to embark on an exercise on the future. You need to find the future scenarios. And second, once the desired scenario is chosen, the exercise is to go to planning. As I was saying, I'm going to dwell on a theme that concerns all of us, which is climate changes. Climate changes today impacts everybody, and more particularly Morocco, in a brutal way. And Morocco is impacted directly by this climate change. The impact goes essentially through war, excess of water, shortage of water, and the pictures are here to testify to this. The Muhammadiyah floods, devastating floods. On the other side of the sea, there is a drought, severe drought for many years. And this year also, Morocco is going through severe drought. In fact, there are many signs that announce this impact. First, there is the reduction of snow on the mountains, and there are also changes in rain water, and also there is a change of migratory birds' itineraries. If you allow me, we can examine a number of maps or the climate evolutions over in the next 50 years. Morocco will know a certain number of constraints, such as the rising of the water level and temperature, and the reduction of waterfall all over the Moroccan territory. These maps, or this map, is to explain to you. Each map gives us by 2050 the tendencies, the scenarios, and there are two ways of doing things. Either there is an optimistic scenario and a pessimistic one also, and we are looking to see of course, either they are optimistic or at least in between. This is the temperature that is the national territory will really know a high rise of temperature between 2 and 3 Celsius centigrade or Celsius degrees. There is really work to do in order to face this constraint. In fact, this is by way of showing you equally the evolution of waterfalls, which leaves a lot to be desired. So there's a tendency to shortage and a drop of waterfall, even if today we have dams that can mobilize up to 19 billion cubic meters, but we rarely manage to attain this figure. 7 out of 9 years, we are below the 70% of the dam capacities in water. This is about the tendency, of course, for the mobilization of water resources in dams and watersheds nationwide. This shows that between 2050, between 1940 and 2015, there's always a drop in water resources, and we need to prepare ourselves in order to meet this challenge and lift this challenge, which might risk, in fact, of bringing a lot of negative effects to our socio-economic development in Morocco, which is based on the provision of water and use of water that are getting scarcer and scarcer by the day. This is just to explain to you that we went between 1960 to 2,600 cubic meters per person per year. Today we're at 700 cubic meter, and if the tendency is confirmed, we'll be at 500 cubic meter, and by 2050 we can even reach 250 cubic meter per person per year. That is to say, we need to do a lot of work so that we can, this tendency wouldn't be confirmed. How can we summarize? How can we sum up the impact that we feel today? That is to say, waterfall irregularity, and if the tendency continues dropping for water resources, if the tendency continues the dropping in waterfall, there are a lot of impacts that are being felt today, and that such resources by 2015 will continue to be rarefied as time goes by. What should we do then in order to meet this problem? There's a whole policy that has been adopted. There is the new development model, which has enlisted a number of strategic projects, and I'm going to dwell on the fourth one, which stipulates that towards sustainable and resilient territories, there is a way for development. There are strategies such as preserving natural resources and to reinforce resilience of the territories in the presence of climate changes. So, such policies that we put in place aim today at mobilizing further the use of resources. I'm not going to dwell on this. This is my way of saying there is a barrages which would show their limits. As I was saying, with the dams, we can mobilize up to 19 billion cubic meters, and today we cannot mobilize that quantity. And with the multiple systems that have changed, there's a risk. That's why there is another orientation today, is to grant the country by this salting seawater. And this will be coupled with new renewable energies. That's why we are going to work on the two parts and we'll try to adapt ourselves in the face of climate changes, and we'll try to contribute to the international effort to reduce gas emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. I'm not going to dwell on this. In order just to show you the orientations that we have taken today, that is, there's a whole, we aim at putting in place a 20 seawater desalination, 20 stations. So there is to mobilize, in order to mobilize 20 billion cubic meters, additional one. This is by way of what we are doing, and to show that through this vision for the future and through the exploration of the future foresight, we will be working on reverting the tendency or inverting the tendency. And thank you for your attention. So much.
You have respected to the letter the 10 minutes. Now I would like to move to the last but one speaker, Mr. Ghuli Abdel Haq. He is Deputy Director in the Statistics Department in the Ministry of National Education and Sport. You have the floor, sir. Welcome to your second country, Morocco. If you don't mind, I'm gonna share with you the foresight approach in as far as national education is concerned in Morocco. I'm gonna start by reminding you of what we mean by planning. This is a continuous process that requires not only where we are heading, but how we could take the best path. Why did we have planning? Number one is to know exactly where education is heading. Remember, in Morocco, you have a hierarchy. That is to say, you have the ministry and then 12 academies. Then you have the 82 provinces. Each region has an X number of provinces. So we have a framework law, and it needs to be broken down depending on the specificities of regions. Second, we have to respect the provision of the organic law. In Article 5, every ministry, every department to have a 3-year budget plan. And we have also the organic law for the region. That's what we call the advanced regionalization process. And then we want to meet the requests from the Ministry of Finance in terms of our expenses, our budget, etc. So what is this planning? Well, we want to institutionalize education. In the past, each region had its own planning. Now we decided to institutionalize it so that we have a budget, a plan, a program, and then we have to harmonize the procedures. So what did we do? We have a ministerial decision where all the instructions and guidelines are stipulated clearly as to when classes begin, when classes end. So each RF uses the tools that are available to it. Now all the RF use the same tools, and every planner at the regional or provincial level has a password and inserts its own scenario. And at the central level, we look at all the scenario, and then we look at those scenario and decide which one fits. Now, there is also complementarity and coherence between the different planning between the central and the regional levels. What is important here is the respect the national policy. Okay, we cannot talk about something that is not institutionalized nationally. That's the reason why we decided to come up with a coherent, consistent method to offer the planning, the academies a planning tool. Remember, the academies have their own budget, have their subsidies. He is responsible vis-à-vis the country in as far as expenses are concerned. So they have a budget from the ministry. And now offer the academy a tool that allows them to discuss and plan their budget. Here, a little slide that shows the importance of planning. This is the scheme that we have used our Foresight. Number one, statistics. You need to have a database. Then you have HCP data, that is the Haut Commissariat du Plan. Third is to translate the vision and the policy in figures, in numbers. So the planning has the time to translate these into a narrative. We have the tool, and we give time to the planners to look at what they are targeting and how they can reach it at the regional level. Then there will be an estimation of the budget to cover their plan of action. Despite the fact that a director of an academy can dream, but now they have to respect the macroeconomic balance and to look at the importance of education in as far as the GDP, so that we can't have an unbalanced relationship or situation between the different departments. So if they make some mistakes in the forecast, they go back and review or revisit their scenario. Here I want to show you the link between long-term and short-term programming. So we have the planning for 5 to 6 years, regional, provincial and national. The law framework law, you have the government program that has a priority in the midterm, and then there are services that are discussed by the different academies. What we ask is an information system and the different data. So we have our own bank database. So all this to inform the programming. So we will have a programming in as far as infrastructure, needs and human resources, social support to students, financial programming, budget, etc. Now let's see how the dialogue takes place. We start with the provinces. We talk with the council, the city council, the province council. This is at the level of 82 provinces. Each academy consolidates and it has its own planning. You have scale economy is important when we are in micro, not when not in the micro level. So there is a bottom-up and top-down approach. So there are many other stakeholders here involved. Then we talk with the central level, which has the macro planning and talks with the different academies to have a national planning in consultation with the Ministry of Finance, the OFPTT, where amount discussed with the Minister of Finance. You can see the census here. You can see Morocco. In 2013, we started, each student has a code, a unique code. and we monitor that schooling. We know that Muhammad has X code, so he has dropped out, he's reached the university, he has graduated. So the planner looks at the codes, and then he has a micro planning where we go all the way down to see what we need in the future. Because most of the time when we find that students with high investments, it is built for 800 students, and then there are only 200 or 300 students. So we need to know exactly what to invest. The last slide is the global architecture of our PSP. As I said, we collect data. The planner doesn't process anything. The system brings the needs for his plan. He can calculate even the indicators. He may know who's doing the play, because the system does it automatically. There is gonna processing of data. Then comes scenario. The scenario, what are scenario here? By way of example, I take one indicator. Our minister is talking about to reduce dropout by 1/3. So the plan will go to 2020, and he writes this figure. And the system, the information system, give different scenario. And at the end, as I said, why do we do the SIG? Because we collaborate with the Ministry of Equipment. Because when we propose to build a school somewhere, you need to coordinate with the other departments, like the roads that will be built, etc., etc.
It's a fiction that we.
The last speaker to take the floor is Mrs. Sarah Parker, acting team leader of the Research and Innovation Unit and the International Organization of Standardization. She
To be a speaker in this panel.
The future is a fiction that we are all writing together. So what will the world of 2050 look like? Today we have a changing climate, an expanding population, rapid urbanization, stagnating economies, and polarized politics. How will we face these challenges? Will we benefit from medical breakthroughs and soaring standards of living? Can we establish an equitable economy? Can we regenerate our natural systems? No one knows any of this for sure, but we can imagine. I'd like to share with you 2 future scenarios from the architects of the 2015 Paris Agreement. It is 2050 and the world we are creating. Beyond the emissions reductions registered in 2015, no further efforts were made to control emissions. We're heading for a world that will be more than 3 degrees warmer by 2100. This could mean that in many places around the world, the air is hot, it's heavy, and depending on the day, it's clogged with particulate pollution. Your eyes often water and your cough never seems to disappear. Or it is 2050, and the world that we must create. We have been successful in halving emissions every decade since 2020. We are heading for a world that will be no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer by 2100. This could mean that in most places in the world, the air is moist and it's fresh, even in cities. It feels a lot like walking through a forest, and it's very likely that that is exactly what you're doing. The air is cleaner than it has been since before the Industrial Revolution. You have trees to thank for that. They are everywhere. It wasn't the single solution we required, but the proliferation of trees bought us the time we needed to vanquish emissions. These are 2 of the future scenarios, but our story has yet to be written. and whether intentionally or not, we, humanity, will decide our future through the measures that we take now. So how does ISO anticipate the future? Understanding the context in which ISO operates is essential to defining our priorities. This includes identifying external drivers of change and evaluating their impact on our organisation. In envisaging ISO's role over the next decade, we've identified 4 primary drivers of change as the areas where we see international standards having the most potential impact and relevance in the world. Those areas are society, technology, the environment, and the economy. We operate in a world where change is a constant and where challenges and disruptions can be global in scale. So in order to be well positioned within this global context, ISO must have a clear and agile strategy that defines our purpose and what we want to achieve, while also allowing us to anticipate changes and adapt quickly to the world around us. So our vision for 2030 is making lives easier, safer, and better. And our mission is that through our members and their stakeholders, we bring people together to agree on international standards that respond to global challenges. ISO standards support global trade, they drive inclusive and equitable economic growth, they advance innovation, and they promote health and safety to achieve a sustainable future. The goals that we've set ourselves are stepping stones to our vision, and they'll help us to ensure that our work makes lives easier, safer, and better. They will help maximise our impact, and they'll ensure that through our members, we bring experts together to agree on international standards that address the global challenges that we face. We will focus on 6 priorities to achieve our goals and to maximise our impact within the context of the drivers of change. One of these priorities is that we need to better capture what future opportunities for standardisation. How do we discover our trends of tomorrow that have not yet found their way into standardisation? ISO has developed a standardisation foresight framework to help us look more systematically at the long term and to encourage discussion and exchange within the ISO system about future opportunities for international standardisation. The foresight framework that ISO has established is a set of approaches that help explore, imagine, and anticipate the future in an open but structured way. Foresight can help identify and explore challenges and opportunities emerging from the multiple signals and drivers of change that are shaping the future. Foresight is also critical to inform decisions and act as a trigger for developing strategic options in a context full of unknowns. ISO looks forward to taking this journey with you into the future. I thank you for your attention.
Parker for her very brief intervention. And now you can indulge yourself in asking our panelists. I think we have some time, but I don't want to abuse your time of the audience. What I suggest is that we take 3 to 4 questions, and I will give the opportunity to the panelists to answer them. And if need be, we can come back to the audience and pick up additional questions. I have Mustafa Ghrazi. I will alternate 1 man, 1 woman, and so that everybody will be satisfied. And 1 right, 1 left, so I don't have any detriment to anybody. So let's see Mustafa and then our professor from UNRWA. Okay.
Thank you. I feel comfortable to ask my question in Arabic.
I would like to thank the moderator and the panelists. I have a question. Since this morning, I would like to share with you from the morning we have been talking about foresight and future anticipation. This is another discussion. This is in a way that is quite rational. What I have learned from 4 names, Mr. Mehdi Manjra, Emilio Fontella, and Khairuddin Hasib, and Talaka Akiko, and there are 4 among the giants in foresight, thinking that the building of the future need to be very rational, because the decisions built on rationalism have been hijacked by statistics and algorithm, and sometimes they create an elite that controls the future without the involvement of those of interest. And I agree with Professor Christine when she differentiated between equality and equity. For instance, Mr. Emilio, in one of the sessions I participated in, talks about how we can be a society without unemployment in the next 15 years to come. And he said that he needs $45 billion, but he added $17 billion unaccounted for and not rational and are not to be accepted by statisticians, because with which we are going to buy social peace for the unemployed who cannot wait for the long term. That is the question. That is, what is the position of irrationalism in building the future? Thank you, Mr. Mustafa. Mr. Mustafa Razan, those who do not know him, is a college professor at the University of Tokyo, and also a professor at this university, and also a distinguished researcher at Parkers for the New South. With your permission. Thank you, Mr. Lolishki. I'm going to congratulate all the speakers, panelists. I'm going to react to what Mr. Kharjit has said concerning the subject of climate change, which is of great interest to me, more particularly. First, I would like to remind us that humanity and nature are down a perilous road, and that climate changes as a vector of social inequality and social injustice, which is getting bigger and bigger between countries from the north and countries from the south, and countries from the south undergo this unjustly because they have not contributed. And I would like to say also, it's up to each one of us. It's high time that each one of us individually and collectively would take consciousness of this problematic concerning Morocco. You talked about, of course, the climate change and the problematic of the water issue. We know that Morocco, we are not just in hydric stress. That is 700 cubic meters a year per inhabitant. We're at 700 cubic meters a year in Morocco, which is quite serious. And we were at more than that in 1970. It's the misuse of water. Let me remind you that on this planet we have only 3% of potable water. There's a lot of water, but only 3% that we waste in an unjust way. Are you all conscious that when consumes a cup of coffee of 125 milliliter, you use 140 liters of water, and that when you consume 1 kilo of meat, there are 14,400 cubic meter that are consumed. That's it's in the services, so that a product would arrive home. It goes through or crosses many kilometers and consumes a lot of water. And as you know, each one of us has a carbon footprint. You should know that we also have a water footprint, but there are solutions, of course. Morocco, and thanks to His Majesty, who has had these extraordinary visions. First, dams. Unfortunately, that we have some dams that are in difficulty. We need to review this. And there is the vision of renewable energies. And there is also many strategic plans for the climate. I would like to say here, in the presence of everybody, that Morocco, in relation to fighting climate changes, is classified second worldwide after Sweden, and even before, well before Great Britain, because in Morocco we do a lot for the fighting, for struggle, for adaptation, for resilience. But there is still a lot to do. As to water, thanks to His Majesty, we are multiplying the desalinization of seawater, but also water purification stations and recycling of waters. And we can also work on the recovery of water, namely fog water and rainfall water, which is lost. And then I think also that through the world, across the world, I think that when our panelists talked about when you do a program or a project, we need to think about its impact on everybody. Yes, because now when we trace an objective, we say it's smart, but please, we need to add a E, smart E, smart and ecological, that is environmental. It means I must think about what this objective would positively impact everybody around me. So if the North wants to help the South, we need to think in this way. And I think, and I believe there is a solution, that is to go from what we call that is a linear thing, that is everything that is linear consumption, so that it can be a circular consumption, that is to say, to reduce, reuse, recycle, and reconsume. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have kept the essence of your question. The lady over here. I will speak Arabic. Dr. Iqbal Samaloti, Professor of Planning and Social Development and activist in community work and civil society work in Egypt. I would like to commend the Red Cross in what is going on now on the ground in Egypt in what concerns the Sudanese crisis. In fact, they organize their work on the ground, and they facilitate things for all parties concerned. And thank you so much for that. Christine, I am a Secretary General of the Arab Network for Fighting Literacy. I was here in Morocco 5 years ago in a conference, and there was a conference, and there were 140 countries who signed the Marrakesh Accord for literacy and lifelong education, and this framework could be also an oversight view for fighting illiteracy and adult education. And believe that the World Week for Education and its campaign and the Arabic campaign, and I'm a member in both, they are assessing now and evaluating the Marrakesh framework in all countries. I hope that this would take into account especially the role of civil society in changing policies and legislations in our countries within the context of the Marrakesh Accord for education. I benefited a lot from your presentation, and the Ministry of Education in Egypt. I would like to point out that civil society in Egypt did an oversight study on 2 categories in schools, in primary school, that is about the geniuses in class, and adopted them for development and capacity building, and also the category that find difficulties in learning. So civil society has pioneering models in the Arab world. I hope that afterwards we will have time to raise such issues. Thank you, dear lady, and I salute in you your insistence on struggling to fight illiteracy and to encourage adult education. The gentleman in the first row, and then afterward the lady here. Good morning. Thank you for organizing this wonderful conference. I would like to thank all the organizers. I'm Dr. Muntazir, Director of the Center of Research at the Palestinian Liberation Organization. I would like to give you an overview. We hope that in the first session was theoretical, because part of the presentations of the questions were far from foresight, because all the guests made great presentations, and I benefited from them personally. But if we were to assess and evaluate the Arab experience in foresight, and what is the main reason that left the Arab world behind in foresight, governments in the Arab world would invite experts in order to lay down a foresight plan. but without taking into account the culture of the Arab society, or in settlement, dispute settlement and conflict settlement, they call upon a foreigner to assess Arab policies in the Arab world. I would like to add that is in any Foresight study, it should take into account the culture of the region, and that the people doing this Foresight research should be from the same society, and even if need be, they should be trained on this. Thank you. Thank you for your observation. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Saad Haida, professor at the Faculty of Science at the University of North Wales. My question, probably in the same vein as the gentleman who preceded me, concerns, in fact, this aspect of foresight. I believe that there is a small confusion between foresight and forecasting, prediction. In fact, in what has been presented concerning climate change and the impact on water resources, belongs to forecasting, especially, for example, the impact of climate change with the different models, etc. It's rather, this belongs to forecasting. My question is whether this confusion cannot have an impact on the strategy to be adopted in the future. So, to define whether it's a prospective or a foresight or a forecasting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor. We're going to stop here for the time being. We're going to give the chance to the panelists to react to these questions, and then we'll have another list of questions. Okay, I'll give you the priority. Thank you. Maybe I'm going to answer the question that was raised today. There are not only climate changes that are of concern to the world. We have identified many problems on the planet, be it biodiversity, climate changes, water resources. We mentioned 3%. How can 3% can meet the needs, which is always on the increase? There is equally a greenhouse effect, the ozone layer. So that's why 2030 agenda was built on the basis of the agenda of OMT. That is, how can we meet prosperity requirements and share this prosperity with everybody and each one? The agenda defines responsibilities. Eventually, each one should be impacted positively by this prosperity. Okay, there are limits for the planet that we shouldn't cross today. That's why multilateral cooperation is reinforced, or should be reinforced, through negotiations, so that the whole world will benefit. We will be prosperous. Okay, and we shouldn't cross the limits of the planet. If we were to preserve the planet and make it hospitable for us and for our socio-economic activity. Thank you, Mr. Ftrit. We shouldn't forget also that henceforth there are forecasting, and there's even planning through what we call SDGs, Social Development Goals. States do not have only the opportunity, but they have a sort of political and legal and moral obligation, so that they can be provisional, so that they can project themselves into the future and to do future foresight. I believe foresight and forecasting. Foresight is long-term one. When we talk about tendencial projections, it's forecasting. That is, we have data in a chronological series, and from such chronological series, we need to follow the tendency for maximum 10 years. And from foresight data, we can project yourself in a future or near future. But when projects ourselves to in 50 years, it's forecasting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the questions. Predictions. We do foresight in a sense that we are not looking for data. We believe the data from the future doesn't exist, and what we do is complementary to planning and preparing, which is looking at how to embrace novelty, how to be more able to manage complexity. My colleague said 2050, this would be near for us. We would go far beyond. We consider, for example, on intergenerational equity, not only the people that are born in the next 30 years, but more and more and more and more. We have interesting projects, for example, on nuclear waste, where we know we have to think 100,000 years from now. So it is definitely not a prediction, but it's a foresight exercise. This is why we base it on capabilities, because if not, you feel uncomfortable doing so. And I could not agree more with the professor on the back. In fact, I guess this morning, His Excellency Mr. Al-Malik said ethics of the future. This is something where we believe equitability and equity should have a role. Ethics is a good word at UNESCO. As you know, in my sector, we are working on the ethics of AI. It's a recommendation. Now being broader, our mandate has been broadened also to the ethics of neurotech. And you know how much that is also influencing our daily life. So thank you very much for the comment.
أشكرك دكتورة كريس.
I'd like to thank Dr. Christine. No, you were targeted by commending what the Red Cross work.
Back to first and foremost, Dr. Rezrazi talking about the irrational. Part of our planning is also based on the irrational. But we always go towards what is possible because we look at the most plausible scenario rather than as an emergency actor. But we constantly think about the black swan effect. But we still have a problem where donors do not invest in this part. They invest only in the emergency, in the need, on how we respond. But we try to push them slowly but surely towards saying, we have this vision. We continue. Since Qabil wa Habil, the humanity remained on this belligerent path. So we have to predict and continue predicting. With the study that we did, what we tried is target human behavior, knowing that we will continue, on va se taper dessus tout le temps, malheureusement. We try to see where is the positive part, why this group restrained itself, why did it not go all the way towards violence, and we try to detect that and talk to it. So talk to this humanity that exists in each and every one of us. Even if we say nobody is perfect, nobody is full of flaws. So this is the, let's say, the consideration that we take moving forward. Thank you very much. In terms of culture, I can't agree more on what you have pointed out. We need more people on this part from the South, and this is why your policy center is extremely important. This is why the platform of Morocco is extremely important on this South-South cooperation in order to bring more of what we have as a culture and civilization to make in order to plan our futures.
Thank you. Thank you. I fully agree with you on the emphasis that you put on humanity. Unfortunately, it's not in the mind of everybody nowadays. Now, let me come back to see Saad Al-Khaouli. You have some answers to a few questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to thank our guest from Egypt. Of course, I will try to look for the experience in relation to with civil society and the school, especially in Morocco. In Morocco, we try to diversify the school offer with a new kind that is communal school, about 230 communal schools in the urban area. For it to succeed, this kind of school needs to work with its community, who will contribute in activities, the school activities. In this way, I would like to see Egypt's experience. With your permission, I will discuss a little with Professor Mustafa, especially, of course, at the Ministry of National Education. We do planning, we do budget estimates, but there is always a problem of estimates of, I would say, emergencies. I cannot say anything. At the Ministry of National Education, what do? When we plan, we do a budget, an additional budget. Let's say, for example, 5% of this budget for investment. In Morocco, as you know, there are rehousing of shantytown residents. In the middle of the school, I need to remove populations. We have no budget. Any budget like this need to be moved, voted in by Parliament. Second thing, it's immigration inside. We do movement of citizens inside the kingdom. You remember when we did Tanzimat, we said that there will be students more than usual, and we find ourselves with a culture, either the source of livelihood of the family, the mother or the father, who will move and leave their children behind in a village, and we do not manage to control this movement. Is it going to be the whole family or just this source of financing and funding? That's why it's not a planning. I'm saying it quite simply. It's a budget that we put aside and to budgetize it and vote it in Parliament. But everybody will say this is planning and this is an emergency exit for our school. Thank you very much. Do not leave. There is another list of questions and answers. I'm going to give the floor now to... I'm going to favor one of my colleagues. Forgive me for being a partisan, Mrs. Fatima. Go ahead. And then I will go to my student. My question is to be addressed to Mr. Muqtat. Everybody salutes the salinization water stations. Are we thinking about salt, how to stock it, how to get rid of it? It's an environmental problem, a dangerous problem also. Thank you. Thank you for the conciseness of the question. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to thank the organizers and panelists for their interesting presentation. And Madam Mohsin, I'm going to switch into English now.
Candidate at the Faculty of Governance, Economic and Social Sciences in partnership with CNAM in Paris. I would like to not ask questions for panelists, but say a little words about what we are doing at Mohammed VI Polytechnic University about long-term oriented reflection. In fact, we have Imagining Africa's Futures project in partnership with UNESCO and the OCP Foundation, which is Office Chérifien des Phosphates. The aim of these projects is to advance across all Africa the ability to use future through communication, through training, through research-oriented action. We have also certificates at the public policy school, Moroccan anticipatory system, and we also teach prospective for the undergraduates. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm really proud of my student. I can assure you that this has not been concerted. This is very spontaneous. We didn't agree on anything, making publicity for the UNCSP. This is something I think coming from her heart, and it gives it a lot of importance. Now let's see who has, yes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not going to take the floor, but has been attracted by two presentations. The first one, all the distinctions that should be operated between oversight and forecasting. There are 7 words in French that are associated with the oversight. For foresight, we need to make a difference between forecasting, prediction, prophecy, and planning. It's the program and it's the project. They all start by P, and in part linked with the foresight. They are not to be reduced to perspective, and perspective or foresight is not limited to this. Concerning the link of forecasting and foresight, we need to understand the around China war between the two. Certainly, perspective is interested in the long term. Foresight is interested in qualitative aspects, for which forecasting is incapable of bringing answers, because forecasting can only be dealing with the short-term and non-quantitative or quantifiable variables, which is not the case of foresight. And we can use the data of forecasting in the case of a foresight study. If you are in a tendentional forecasting, foresight, signaling this to avoid of throwing the baby with the bathwater, and there are passages between the two. This is the first point. Second point, it's about the question of financing development and financing structural transformation. I was touched by the ladies' advocacy concerning water, but when I heard the talk about assistance or aid, what makes difference today is that we don't talk about financing development in yesterday's terms. And to illustrate my argument, I would say that the main difference between OMDs, that is SDGs that have been adopted in 2000 and ODDs that have been adopted in 2015, deal on the question of financing. SDGs is about transfer of resources from the northern source. In ODDs, there is a partnership, because there are common responsibilities but differentiated ones. Henceforth, the language, the notion of aid or assistance should be banished. You cannot adopt the ODDs sustainable development goals and to continue to talk about them, it would be a contradiction in terms. And I was touched by your advocacy, and I guarantee you I will no longer drink coffee.
Merci, Professor.
Thank you, Professor. I wonder if the transfer of technology and the creation of a fund to help developing countries for transition are not called euphemistically, but in reality it's an assistance, an aid eventually. If there's no other question, I'm going to, yes, there is 1, 2, and I'm going to close the list. 1 at the end, 1, and 3 at the third one. 3 questions, and then we come towards you.
My name is Hanan Daour, and I'm a professor of gender and politics in Ibn Zuhra University in Agadir. In fact, I would like to start from talking about Foresight in relation to also to the Policy Center for the New South. And here I would like to ask a question about whether here in developing countries, in Morocco and many other African countries, do we really have foresight studies? And do we really have foresight planning? Or we are just programming or managing the crisis? I think most of what we, I mean, even if we have some strategic plans in different sectors, but are we really shaping the future in the direction that we want? And here I would like to draw the attention of the panelists to the issue of international cooperation. You asked, or you already mentioned SDGs. So all countries are abided by those international treaties, which means that we have some certain objectives to head towards. But at the same time, where is the specificity, the cultural specificity, the political, the geopolitical, all those aspects that make implementation of those objectives are rather difficult to achieve? And that's my question mainly to UNESCO and ISO. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Here. In the front. Quite in the front, please.
Merci. Merci, je remercie l'ensemble des...
I would like to thank all the panelists for their excellent presentation. I'm Sumir Jakta. I'm representative of ISISCO at UNESCO. I have a question for all the panelists. On the basis of your experiences, can you tell us, as of now, and by 2050, what would be the challenges, one single challenge and an opportunity for the question of immigration, for social transformation, for development, and for education? Fair and square.
Fahafti Idrissi, a professor at University Ibn Tufayl at the Higher School of Education and Training. So this is not a question, but just a comment for Dr. Pfeiffer. Yeah, I really appreciated the picture depicting equity, equality. Yeah, I liked it. But I think we need to go beyond the idea of equality and equity to reach or foster for accessibility. We need to have accessibility in our future or foresights, especially in this vein. So instead of looking for giving support to one or two people, we need to address that wall or that obstacle hindering the accessibility of people to that thing. Okay? So that's it, and thank you so much.
I go back to our panelists. I think you have extremely easy, very simple questions. Take your time. There is no limit, no 10 minutes, no more than that. We have the whole afternoon for us, so please take your time.
Maybe I can start, and then we take the question to all the panelists. First of all, maybe on Africa and the role of Foresight in Africa and what we do at UNESCO. We work, I would say, on different dimensions, different angles. For sure, imagining Africa's futures is it's a center part of this work. It's a long year project, and we will have in this building, not far from here, on the 14th of July, a conference really around that crucial questions that you have put on the table. In addition to that, we work with many different member states. Let me comment in this regard Kenya. Kenya has done a lot of work to upskill their own, starting from the National Commission, but really many, many people to collect more information on that. We do it also in general through projects from the UN, for example, with the UN Youth Envoy on having participatory futures for Africa. So there are many different angles we try to capture this spirit. It contextualizes also culture, but not only, because actually it's not that you develop something for Africa, but that you bring us your innovation to UNESCO, who has really the need to peer learn from each other. So this is really a centerpiece of our work. So you're all invited, I would say, to join us again on the 14th of July. On the question, equity, yes, that was a picture. That was not meant to be an all-encompassing statement. I would agree, but I used the picture with regard to intergenerational equity. That means much more. And we had long debates, even about don't we have to give the opportunity to future generations to make their own errors? This is something that normally we don't believe, no? But actually, if we are sincere about futures literacy, foresight, then the spectrum is much broader than accessibility in the next 20 years, for example. No? That means generations to come. We had a long debate about intra and intergenerational equity. You know, what does it mean? How much do we have to learn from the past? And we know history never teaches us a lot, no? But I would agree, especially in the short term, accessibility is a big problem. But the picture was meant to be broader in a sense of a governance model where all players come together and agree. And yeah, the last question, a bit of a challenge. From my point of view, I believe we should make sure we work against futures anxiety. This is the biggest thing I see at the moment. And with our management of social transformation project, we have seen how much this alleviates polarization, for example, or the lack of trust in institutions. So this is something where only, in our view, capabilities can help to make sure that people feel that it is inclusive enough. No? They are heard, they have the opportunity to speak. We do this through our youth sector at UNESCO, also especially to make sure we can package the messages these people, the young people have to the older policymakers, because very often they have both very good ideas, but on the communication level that we don't match. So I guess we spoke about it already with somebody today. 1 out of 3 young people in the world feels lonely after COVID, but maybe not only due to that. In Europe, we measure the climate anxiety, we measure these things. So we have to really act on that because we really believe that if not in 20 years, the problem will be exponentially bigger. So I don't know if it answers your questions really, but I try to give you my thoughts about it.
Thank you, Dr. Christine. Now, see Abdelhaq. After that,
Merci. Donc,
for national education, we're talking about the challenges facing the Ministry of National Education, which is generalization of schooling for all children of Morocco from 4 to 16 years. This is the constitution. The opportunity is what? In the past, since independence until 2019, quite simply, there were strategies, orientations. But in 2019, it's the first time that Morocco has published Law 4 on education, or the Framework Law 5117. Inside it, they define the citizen of tomorrow and also all the actions. But the problem is a narrative one. Now, if we were to change the government, there will not be a change in terms of objectives behind this law. Quite simply, each government will find its prioritization as to the current context and the way of doing things, but inside, we're all obliged. It's predetermined generalization of schooling. Schooling of children from preschooling has been generalized since 2008, and it has been attached to the primary schools. There are many articles now. They are all defined and set by law. Thank you, Mrs. Rania. Sure.
That you put forward. In 2020, the ICRC review for International Red Cross and Red Crescent published a review talking about the future of humanitarian action. And in this, they started talking about megatrends. It's easy it's just what we talk about also in Foresight. So I'm going to list the 6 megatrends, and we'll see in 2010, 13 years after what happened. So demographic trends, more people, older people, more urbanization, technology and science rapidly changing, economic trends, uneven growth, increasing inequality, political power, changing global patterns, changing domestic determinants, climate change, more disasters, conflict, prolonged, simmering, and increasingly urban. So if we look today, we are exactly in the same pattern. Change became more dramatic for that matter. So these are the trends in a way that haven't changed. But what I feel today, and maybe this is me being an optimist and me being a naive humanitarian, there is around an awakening, and we all agree that now we have to move forward. So I hope that we move all these discussions that we had today from the boardrooms into practice and start really acting. Because I think this is what's missing today, but there is an increased awareness from it were 13 years ago, and I think this is a positive thing that we have to carry with us moving forward.
شكرا الأخت رانيا سمقتيت لك الكلمة الأخيرة. تفضل.
Merci, Mrs. Rania, Mr. Octet. 50% for excessive through renewable energies. It's a real opportunity, and through this, Morocco can and manage to reduce its dependence in energy on the international. So maybe we can go beyond this percentage. The second question concern the desalinization of seawater. Unfortunately, we cannot have an activity with zero pollution. It's impossible, but it's a choice to be made. As we did when we did the choice of renewable energies, we said that it will disturb birds and so on, but it's a choice. When we did the dams, everybody said we're going to stop water in rivers, but it's a choice to be made. It's a choice that should be done in order to counter a real constraint. As you know, last years we nearly had a catastrophe. We had only 32% of our dam capacities was mobilized, so we nearly approached catastrophe in water last year. We cannot work on our economy without trying other alternatives, and I believe university today and research should accompany our policies to face the impacts that will crop up as time goes by. Thank you. On your behalf, I would like to thank our eminent panelists, including the ones who are not with us, for having enriched our discussions today. And at the same time, I would like to thank you for your commitment and your presence until this late hour this afternoon. And I set you an appointment today, tomorrow night. And I hope that today or tomorrow there will be more audiences. Thank you so much for your contributions and participation.